What's up, guys and gals? This is Abyss with Super Quantum Leap, and I am going to go over today with you guys the Gold Paladin deck profile. So, this Gold Paladin deck, the way I run it, I run the Gurguit build, and I play it very aggressively. So first, we'll start off with the triggers. 16 triggers, standard and Vanguard. I run 3 Scarface Lion. Scarface Lion, he's 5k booster on top of the 4k boost he already gives when you have Gurguit on the Vanguard circle, and he's a +1. So I run 3 of him. I don't really need to run 4. I've never, because you want to have draw, but not too much. Just 4 standard, regular crit trigs. But except you can drop with this, with Flame of Victory, you can drop it on the board, put it in the soul. It just adds to your soul, adds for a setup. And this deck revolves around Counterblast and Soul Blast, so you have to have a decent amount of setup to play the combos. 1 of Restless Knight, because he's just there. He's kind of a utility. I run 4 stands. This guy, Player of the Holy Pike, because this is an aggressive build, so you want to constantly be able to pressure your opponent into guarding and using their hand, so that you can overwhelm them with, high attack every turn. And what this guy does is he allows, when you're at GB1 and you hit Unite, which I'll explain combos later, when you hit Unite and you're at GB1, you drop him on the board. If you're at 4 damage and you kind of blasted too much and you want to recover a little bit so that way you can keep moving later in the game, you drop him on the board. When he boosts, at the end of the battle that he boosts, you drop him into the soul and then counter charge 1. Keeps you counter blasting throughout the game. So I run 4 of him, and then 4 heals, because 4 heals is essential. So that is all the triggers that I run on the grade 3s. I run 1 of Knight of Compassion and Light, because it's not a GB based skill, and if you do, you just counter blast 1, or no, you don't counter blast. You just soul blast 1. You reveal the top card of your deck. And if it has Unite skill, you call it to rearguard and increase the power of this unit by whatever unit you called. And if it does not have the Unite, you just place it on the bottom of the deck. It helps you cycle through back, helps you cycle and get to your triggers. 1 of Salvation Lion Grand Easel is a direct counter to Link Joker. I only run 1 for that reason, because this deck is all about Gurguit, keeping Gurguit on the Vanguard circle, because you need Gurguit to make your combos. This, however, is just a direct counter to Link Choker's Limit Break 4, Counter Blast 2, Soul Blast 2. Unlock all of your locked cards. The number of Gold Paladin rearguards you have is 5 until the end of the turn. This card gets plus 10k and a critical. And then at the end of the turn, Soul Charge 1, and you Counter Blast 1. So I only run 1 of that. 2 Dawn Gal, simple. 5k Interceptor when you hit Unite on your opponent's turn by guarding at GB1. And then it is a 10k booster. Also works well when you go into Scourge Point and use Gurguit's Counter Blast skill to call this, give it +7, and then it becomes a 10k rearguard booster. So 2, and then the all-star MVP of the grade 3s of this deck, what this deck revolves around, is Gurguit. So at GB2, you can guard from the deck, Counter Blast 1, Soul Blast 1. At the beginning of your guard step, the battle this unit was attacked, you may pay the cost. If you do, look at the top 4 cards of your deck, search for up to 1 among them, call it to guard circle at rest, and then shuffle your deck. So he is a guard from deck card, and then his stride skill is Counter Blast 1, check the top 4, call anyone that you want. And a lot of the combos with this deck revolve around having him on the Vanguard circle, and then counter blasting with the stride and running combos from that. Alright, moving on to the grade 2s. So, grade 2s. 4 Holy Mage Helio, because he's a rusher. He's an early game rusher. It's not a GB skill. He has auto rearguard. He has to be on rearguard, of course. Counter Blast 1, put him into the soul, check top 3, call 1, then put the rest on the bottom of the deck. This pressures your opponent into guarding and using their hand, because you can consistently, kind of do what Gear Chronicle does, except it's not time leaping, how it bounces cards back and binds them and then bounces 1 on the field, and then it attacks, and then you can bounce it back out. Kind of like that, but it's counter blasting. Again, this is a counterblast heavy deck, so you have to pace yourself. 2 of Nine of the Faint Sun Marcia. Again, she's also not a GB oriented unit. 8k power. This is utility and it's a defender card. I normally don't find myself playing her as an aggressive play. I find her, you know, I'll drop her on rear guard or I'll drop her up front if I have to. But if you call 2 more units, put her in the soul countercharge. Again, this deck is countercharge heavy, so you have to pace yourself. Dongyao, again, aggressive, GB1, gains +5 when it attacks the Vanguard on rear guard. So, comes a 14k attacker, and then you hit it with Scourge Point, gives a +7, just go from there. 1 Knight of Dawnlight, 10k attacker, mainly because I find that I ride him onto the Vanguard more than anything, and then it's just high numbers. And 1 of Knight of Spring's Light, Paramour. His Unite skill isn't GB oriented, he gains +2 when you call 2 more units, so it's an 11k attacker. And then his GB skill is Counterblast 1 when he's placed on rear guard. You can pay the cost. If you do, look at the top 3 cards of your deck, search for up to 1, call it in the same column as this, put the rest on the bottom of your deck in any order, which helps you cycle through your cards, helps you cycle your deck to hopefully hit triggers on your Vanguard attack. So that's all the grade 2s I run. I run 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Nope. So I run 8 grade 3s. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I run 10 grade 2s. Okay. On with grade 1s. Obviously, 4 perfect guards. Holy Mage Candace, you discard 1, shut down anything your opponent's throwing at you, and here's where the draw engine kind of comes into play. So I run 4 of Jeffrey. He's a 7k attacker, but his GB Unite skill on rear guard is when you attack and he boosts, at the end of the battle that he boosted, you put him in the soul, draw a card. Combo this with Scarface, you can, on a stride, you can go plus 3 or 4 at the end of your turn. Due to the fact that you draw off him and then if you have Scarface, you can use Scarface in combo with Gurguit, and if you're boosting with 2 Jeffreys in the back, at the end you're going to go +3 all around. So that's the combo you can run with him. And then Jeffrey is just kind of like a draw. A lot of times I find myself riding him as a Vanguard, but that's okay because this deck has a lot of draw already in it and it's aggressive. So the idea with this deck is to maintain hand advantage and overwhelm the opponent. 4 Garbaduke because stride fodder gains +2 when it's in hand, paying cost for stride. And then 2 of Knight of Morning Shadow Kim Marcus because AK grade 1, and a lot of time I'll see myself just either boosting with her or I'll ride her as a Vanguard. So now, my final card in the main deck, besides the starter, I run 2 starters. Knight of Early Dawn, Cole, and he's a Forerunner. His skill, when he's on rear guard, is GB1. If you hit Unite, you put him into the soul, check the top 3, call 1 to rear guard, and it gains +2. You combo this with Scourge Point, and you can go +7 to whatever you call. And then because Scourge Point gets +5, and then he gets +7. So I'll explain that, and then I run him as a starter. But I run 2 of him because his skill is very, very good for rushing your opponent. Okay, so now that's all for the main deck. Now I will go over the Stride deck and explain some combos. I run 15 cards in my Stride deck. The first card I'll show off would be the Grade 4 Gurguit. This guy is hands down the finisher for this deck. It has won me so many games when my opponent underestimates how high I can hit them, because this guy's skill is when you stride him from face down, is when he's at GB2, you activate it when you've hit Unite. You Counterblast 1, Soul Blast 2. This unit gets +5 for each of your rear guards until the end of the turn. Then you choose up to 5 of your rear guards, they get +5. So how this works, when you wait till your opponent exhausts their hand after you rush them, or you maintain your hand advantage as a late game finisher or early game finisher if your opponent makes a mistake. You stride this, and then you fill your board after you've set up your soul, and you have like 3 or 4 face-up damage. Then Counterblast, Soul Blast 2, plus 5 all around, plus 25. You do that about 3 times, and you can get him up to 110k. And then most of your rear guards are hitting for 30k or higher. So this is your finisher. If you play him too early, you can exhaust way too many resources and end up, you know, setting yourself up for failure, because if he's your finisher, he's not meant to be played early. He's meant to be played when your opponent has less than 4 cards in hand, so that way you can attack over them and they can't guard anything that you throw at them. So one of him, that's all I've seen, all that I think is necessary. 2 Scourge Point, this is your early game rusher. This is, I go into him as much, I use 2 of him almost every game. These are the first 2 strides I go into, because when you stride into him with Gurguit on the Vanguard circle, you Counterblast 1 for Gurguit, check the top 4, call 1, then whatever you call gets plus 7, 2,000 from the Gurguit skill, and plus 5 for this, and then this gets plus 5. So use that in tandem with your starters, and you can boost them up to 50, 55k your first stride if you play your cards right. So I run 2 of Scourge Point from the Fighters collection, you know, common rarity, I believe. Let me check. Yeah, it's a promo. 1 Sea Breeze. Obviously, Sea Breeze is utility only. You can just stride over your opponent if they don't ride, punish them. 2 Gold Knight of Incandescence. Just kind of sets you up. You kind of blast 1, Soul Blast 1, check the top 2, call it to rear, and go from there. Kind of a setup. 2 Blizza, because this is another late game finisher. When you've strode into almost all of your cards in your stride deck, you play this, flip 1, and it gains plus 5 for every face-up G unit you have in your G zone. So 2 of him, because he can be a 50k attacker late game and a late game finisher. 2 Spearcross, because you're playing against Link Joker or Kagero, you don't want to play any rear guards, so you use this guy to rush your opponent in 1 turn and try to finish him. I don't run into him very much because his cost is heavy. He Counterblast 2, so again, with this deck, you have to have Counterblast to make it work. 1 Slimy, because I rarely ever go into this guy. He's a G Guardian. His skill is you ditch a heal trigger, choose one of your rear guards, put it on the bottom of your deck. When this unit is placed on guard, you may pay the cost. If you do, look at the 5 cards on the top of your deck. Choose up to 2 cards with different grades among them and call them to guard, shuffle your deck. This thins your deck quite a bit and can mess up your trigger hit if you use it too early. So 1 of him, 2 Sacred Heaven Prayer Master Rhea, because she's a 20k guarder if you have 2 or more rear guards. If you have 2 or more rear guards, you play her, she gains plus 5 and 20k blocker. And then 1 of the Trial Deck Golden Dragon, Rebreath Dragon, just G-Assist fodder, and just so I can flip him up early and not have to worry about him. And then 1 Screw, because Screw is essential. Because of its skill, you choose a card from your hand, discard it, and then it becomes a 25k blocker. 25k guard. So that is the stride deck that I have for this. And now I'm going to explain some combos with this deck. So, alright. So now what I'll do is I'll showcase some combos and then I'll wrap this up. And then if you feel like you want to play this deck, play it. It's fun. It's a lot of fun. I love this deck. So let me go ahead and get a good combo set up. One of the combos that I run quite a bit. So I'll leave him in the rear guard. And then let's say I rode this. Rode into him, and then I have Gurguit on the Vanguard circle, and I have enough to stride in my hand here. Let me pull this. Okay, so let's say I have 2 face-up damage for the time being, as an example, and I'll show you guys why this deck is aggressive and combo heavy. It did not shuffle, so... Okay, so let's say you got 2 face-up damage, and you have enough to stride in your hand. All you need is Garbaduke. And you've called, let's see, you've called 2 units. No, I'll explain that in a minute. Okay, so you're going to go ahead and draw, and then you go into your stride phase. So stride. And your first stride, usually my first stride with this deck is Scourge Point. So then when you go into Scourge Point, you activate Gurgit's stride skill, you counter blast 1, and then you check the top 4. So normally this is essential because I would call him +7, +5. And then you shuffle. And that's one of the combos that you go into with this deck, because then you only need one more to hit Unite, called Rearguard. Your Knight is live, and then you use your starter, put it in the soul, check the top 3, and you just keep going from there, +7, +5, and eventually you can boost them up to 30k, 40k, and just swing for high numbers consistently. And normally the first 2 strides of the game are Scourge Point for me, because he's an early game rusher. Not many players, especially Kagro, can guard it unless they have a perfect guard. If they do guard it, they're exhausting their hand, and it just sets you up to play this once you hit GP2. So that's just some of the combos in this deck. This deck is very combo heavy. It's Paladins. It's just like roll Paladins. It revolves around calling rear guards and boosting them, except, well, not. This deck revolves around counter blasting and soul blasting, calling rear guards, and then boosting your rear guards to hit for high numbers consecutively every single turn. So that has been the Gurguit Gold Paladin deck profile. Thank you guys for watching. If you enjoyed it, if you want to play the deck, play it. It's fun. Leave a like, leave a comment, subscribe, and thanks for watching.